Restenburg, East Prussia. 9:12 a.m. The air hung heavy with pine and diesel. Inside the thick forest, the Wolfschanz, Hitler's wolf's lair, buzzed with the tense rhythm of war. The smell of sweat, oil, and damp earth clung to every corridor. A black Mercedes G4 rolled through the gates, escorted by a pair of Wehrmacht motorcycles. Inside, Colonel Klaus Schenk Graf von Stauffenberg, Chief of Staff to the Reserve Army, sat motionless. His right hand was gone, 2 fingers of his left missing. The price of Tunisia. But his eyes were clear, resolute, burning with the quiet certainty of a man who had already made peace with death. He adjusted his officer's cap and whispered to himself, "This must end today." In the seat beside him rested a brown leather briefcase. Inside, 2 British-made plastic explosives, PMK bombs with acid-triggered time fuses. Simple, deadly, and irreversible once set. At 10 o'clock, the car stopped before Barrack I, the main conference hut. Usually, Hitler's briefings were held in an underground bunker, but this morning, because of the oppressive summer heat, the meeting had been moved to a wooden barrack with open windows, a small change that would alter history. Stauffenberg's driver, Sergeant Werner von Heffen, stepped out first, saluting sharply. Both men exchanged a glance, the kind soldiers share when there's nothing left to say. Inside, Adolf Hitler, dressed in his gray field tunic, stood over a massive oak map table, surrounded by his inner circle, Field Marshal Keitel, General Jodl, Colonel Brandt, and Admiral Denitz's adjutant. The walls were covered with tactical maps of the Eastern Front. Red lines marked the Soviet advance. Operation Bagration was devouring Army Group Center. The Führer's mood was volatile. Reports of Russian breakthroughs filled the air like a fog of doom. Yet, in his delusion, he still believed victory possible. At 12:10 p.m., Stauffenberg entered. Keitel looked up. "Ah, Stauffenberg, good. You have the situation report for the Reserve Army?" "Yes, Herr Feldmarschall," Stauffenberg replied calmly, placing the briefcase on the table, just a few feet from Hitler. No tremor, no hesitation. The colonel excused himself, pretending to take a call. As he stepped out, he clicked the fuse capsule inside the briefcase. The acid began to eat through a wire. A slow 10-minute death sentence. Outside, Heffen waited with the car running. Stauffenberg's heart pounded. He'd just lit the fuse that might end 6 years of madness or condemn them all. At 12:42 p.m., the explosion ripped through the room, a flash of white light. A roar that shattered windows 200 meters away. The barrack lifted from its foundation, splinters and smoke filling the forest. For a brief moment the world held its breath. "Hitler is dead," Stauffenberg murmured, watching the plume rise above the treetops. "It's over." He climbed into the car. To Berlin. Rustenburg Airfield, 1:15 p.m. The sound of the Heinkel He-111's twin engines roared to life, scattering gravel and pine needles into the wind. Stauffenberg and his aide, Werner von Heffen, rushed aboard. Their uniforms were still dusted with debris from the explosion. Their minds aflame with a single thought: it's done. As the bomber lifted into the pale sky above East Prussia, Stauffenberg leaned against the window, staring down at the endless forest below. The scene of the assassination, the wolf's lair, shrank into insignificance. He turned to Heffen. "He's dead. I saw the blast myself." "No one could have survived that." Heffen nodded, his jaw tight. "Then we must move fast. Olbricht will start Operation Valkyrie as soon as we land." Below them, the Reich was already beginning to fracture. In Berlin, General Friedrich Olbricht, head of the Army's General Office, waited anxiously by the phone. At his side stood General Ludwig Beck, the elder statesman of the resistance, and Colonel Albrecht Merz von Kornheim, one of the few officers brave enough to act. Their plan, Operation Valkyrie, was a masterpiece of deception. Officially, it was a contingency plan to suppress internal revolts. In reality, it would be used to seize control of Germany once Hitler was confirmed dead. By 3 o'clock p.m., the Luftwaffe transport touched down at Rangsdorf Airfield near Berlin. Stauffenberg jumped from the plane, greeted by Major Ernst Riemer's adjutant, who saluted sharply. "The Führer." "Is he dead, Herr Oberst?" Stauffenberg didn't hesitate. "Yes, Hitler is dead." The words carried the weight of destiny. At Army headquarters on Wendlerstraße, orders began to fly. Telex machines clattered. Reserve units were mobilized. Couriers raced through corridors with stamped documents reading, "By order of the Führer, all SS units are to be disarmed. Control of the Reich has been assumed by the army." The coup had begun. But a single spark of life still flickered in East Prussia. At the Wolf's lair, smoke drifted through the shattered conference hut. Hitler, shaken but alive, emerged with tattered trousers, a scorched cap, and ringing ears. His right arm burned, his hair singed, but he was alive. By 3:30 p.m., SS adjutants were already sending out telegrams. The Führer has survived an assassination attempt. The traitors will be hunted down. The great illusion of the conspirators that Hitler was dead was already collapsing. At 4 p.m., as Stauffenberg stood in his Berlin office signing orders and rallying officers to the cause, the phones began to ring. Confusion spread like wildfire. Reports conflicted. Some said Hitler was alive, others said it was propaganda. General Fromm, their superior and commander of the reserve army, stormed into the room. "What's going on here, Stauffenberg? The Emperor is alive. I've just spoken to Keitel himself." Stauffenberg turned, his face pale but defiant. "He lies. He must lie. Don't you see, Fromm? This is our only chance to save Germany." But Fromm's loyalty wavered. Like many in the German high command, he feared both sides, the conspirators and the SS. He left the room without another word. By 5 p.m., the first cracks began to show. SS units loyal to Hitler started surrounding key government buildings. Communications with Munich and Vienna went silent. The dream of a new Germany, free from tyranny, was slipping through their fingers. Still, Stauffenberg refused to yield. Standing by the large oak desk at Benlerstraße, he looked over the city bathed in the orange glow of evening. "If we die, let it be as Germans who chose honor over obedience." Outside, the sound of approaching vehicles echoed through the courtyard. The SS was coming. Berlin, 8 p.m. The sun had set over the capital of a crumbling empire. Inside the Bendler block, headquarters of the Army Reserve, the once busy corridors were now filled with whispers, confusion, and fear. The telex machines had fallen silent. Outside, engines rumbled in the distance. Troops were closing in. Stauffenberg stood at the window, the glow of streetlights catching the scars on his face. Below him, loyal soldiers of the reserve army waited nervously, their rifles clutched tight but their hearts uncertain. The orders to arrest SS officers had been rescinded. Many units now refused to act. The truth, or what people believed to be the truth, was turning the tide. A radio broadcast had just confirmed it. The Führer lives. He has spoken personally to Reichsmarschall Göring and Reichsführer Himmler. The words landed like bullets. The impossible had become real. Hitler had survived the blast. General Olbricht slammed his fist on the table. It cannot be. The room was destroyed. But Stauffenberg's expression didn't falter. He's lying. The SS controls the radio. We can still win if the army stands with us. Yet the room was losing its courage. Fromm, the highest-ranking officer present, barged back in, his face pale and furious. "You are all under arrest. The Emperor knows everything. The SS is on its way." He turned to his adjutant. "Disarm these traitors." But before his men could act, Heffen drew his pistol. "No, General. You're under arrest, by order of the reserve army." Fromm froze, staring at the colonel and his aide, realizing the tables had turned. For a brief moment the conspirators took control again, but their victory was fleeting. At 9 p.m., the courtyard outside exploded into chaos. Trucks screeched to a halt. Boots thundered on cobblestones. SS units and loyal army troops had arrived, led by Major Otto Ernst Riemer, who had earlier been deceived into supporting the coup. Now he had spoken to Hitler personally. Riemer barked into his megaphone. "The Emperor is alive. Lay down your weapons immediately." Panic swept through the building. Some soldiers obeyed, others hesitated. The sound of rifles being cocked echoed through the hallways. Inside the command room, Olbricht was on the phone, shouting, "We must hold the building! We can't let them take us!" But it was too late. Fromm, ever the opportunist, switched sides once more. He ordered the arrest of the conspirators, his former co-conspirators. "I will take control here," he said coldly. "I will restore order in the Führer's name." Stauffenberg, his face illuminated by a single desk lamp, realized it was over. The last hours of the German resistance were ticking away. He stood tall, dusted off his uniform, and looked at the men who had risked everything beside him. Olbricht, Heffen, Merz von Kornheim. "We tried," he said softly. "The world will know that not all of us followed him." By 11 p.m., the Bendler block was surrounded. The SS burst in, shouting orders and dragging officers into the courtyard. The night air was filled with the smell of exhaust and fear. Fromm, desperate to save his own skin, declared that justice must be served immediately. He convened a court-martial on the spot. No defense, no deliberation. The verdict was death. The 4 conspirators were led outside under the cold light of truck headlights. Stauffenberg's left sleeve fluttered in the wind as he stood before the firing squad. His voice was calm, unwavering. "Long live our sacred Germany." The shots cracked the night. 4 bursts, one after another. At 12:30 a.m., July 21st, Colonel Claus von Stauffenberg fell, his body collapsing onto the cobblestones of the Bendler block courtyard. The coup had failed. But the idea of a different Germany, one that had dared to stand against tyranny, would not die with him. Berlin, July 21, 1944. 2 a.m. Inside the Wolf's lair, the smell of burnt wood still lingered. The bomb's blast had torn the walls apart, but Hitler's fury filled the air even more violently. His right arm trembled uncontrollably. Whether from injury or rage, no one could tell. Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel stood stiff at attention as the Führer screamed, pounding the table with his burned hand. "They tried to kill me, my own officers. My generals, traitors." Beside him, Heinrich Himmler and Martin Bormann exchanged glances. They both understood what would come next, a purge unlike anything Germany had ever seen. Within hours, orders were dispatched to every corner of the Reich. The Gestapo began arresting hundreds of officers, civil servants, and anyone remotely connected to Stauffenberg. The resistance, once a silent network of conscience, was being torn apart by its own government. At dawn, the first names were marked for execution. General Ludwig Beck, the moral voice of the plot, was offered the chance to take his own life. He did so quietly in his office at Benillerblock, a single shot ending a lifetime of loyalty betrayed by madness. Others weren't so lucky. Over the next days, more than 7,000 people were arrested. 200 of them would be executed, not in battle, but in the grim halls of Plötzensee prison in Berlin. In the basement of that prison, iron meat hooks were bolted to the ceiling. The SS filmed each execution for Hitler's personal viewing, a grotesque theater of vengeance. Men like Karl Gordler, Ulrich von Hassel, Hans Oster, and Friedrich Olbricht were stripped naked, hanged with piano wire, their bodies left to twist in slow circles. As these scenes unfolded, Germany itself was collapsing. In the east, the Soviet Red Army was sweeping across Belarus and Poland, annihilating entire divisions. In the west, Allied forces had broken through Normandy and were racing toward Paris. The thousand-year Reich was dying, yet its leader clung to power through terror. On the night of July 22nd, Hitler gathered his inner circle once more at the Wolf's lair. His face was pale, one ear still bandaged, his voice quieter now but full of venom. "This proves it," he muttered. "The army cannot be trusted. From now on, only the SS will protect Germany." He signed the decree with his trembling hand, granting Himmler direct control over all internal security. And the reserve army, the Wehrmacht's independence, the last check on Nazi power, was dead. Across Berlin, soldiers whispered in fear. Some burned letters and diaries. Others quietly destroyed evidence of conversations that could be seen as treasonous. The coup had not only failed, it had sealed the fate of the German resistance. Still, even in defeat, small acts of defiance persisted. In hidden rooms, in barracks, in whispered prayers, officers spoke of Stauffenberg with reverence. They knew what he had tried to do. They knew it had been right. And even Hitler, in his paranoia, understood it too. In a rare moment of reflection, he told his secretary, Trudel Jung, "If I had died today, history might have thought better of me." But he hadn't, and history would not. As the war dragged on into its final apocalyptic months, the shadow of July 20th, 1944 hung over every soldier, every general, every whisper in the corridors of power. It marked the moment when Germany, even within the heart of the Reich, began to turn against its own tyrant. In the end, the bomb at the Wolf's lair did not kill Hitler. But it destroyed the illusion that all Germans followed him willingly.